So welcome to History Pub. It's a production of the Partners of History. We want to give a few thanks. Thanks first of all to our host Bart and all the staff here. Don't forget to treat your servers well and your bartenders. Want to thank Jim Lockhart, who faithfully records the History Pubs, and then they get loaded up on the Cottage Grove History Pub.
Partners in
the Partners in History YouTube channel. So you can, if you miss one or you want to go back and review stuff, they'll be posted. And Jim does all of that out of the goodness of his heart. He edits the slides in so you can get a better view of the slides. We want to thank Heather Endicott for the promotional posters, and as you know, she has completed the Goose mural. The Partners in History that are sponsoring the pubs are the Cottage Grove Museum, the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society, which is the sponsor tonight. We take turns presenting, so each partner is responsible for a couple of talks. Singing Creek, Spirit of Bohemia Mining Days. I just saw the executive director sneak in with his lovely wife. The Spirit of Bohemia Mining Days. The Oregon Aviation Historical Society and Museum, and the Cottage Grove Library. So if you didn't get raffle tickets, we'll have a chance to do that later, but that's a 50-50 raffle. That's you get half of the pot, and I think it's going to be a good one tonight. The other half goes to the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society, who's tonight's sponsor of this talk. So I'd like to introduce President of the Genealogical Society, Debra Monsive, who is and you may not know it, but Deborah spent an awfully lot of time and was our ringleader and cheerleader and prod throughout the Goose fundraising mission. So I want to call Alice Christensen out quickly to the stage. All the mural members did their part, but if it wasn't for this glue that holding us all together, I don't think it would have happened.
Can I read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. This is a special presentation to Debra Monsive, and it's to Debra Monsive with sincere thanks from the Cottage Grove Historical Society, the Bohemia Foundation, and the citizens of Cottage Grove for her hard work in procuring the funds and tireless recording efforts to make the Goose mural in Bohemia Park a reality.
Thank you.
Yes, and I have to say that my very talented husband Alan made it.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
that is so sweet.
Everybody, and there's some special posters that Alan made for you too.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, you're special.
No, you're special too.
For a few weeks.
You guys are sweet. So is everybody ready for an hour living in the past? Because that's what we're going to do. I really want you to look at this slide for a second. And this is a picture that I absolutely love. It's the background on my computers. But this was taken from Reservoir Hill, aka Mount David, McFarland Butte. But it is looking northeast. And so down here is the covered bridge where you can go across and turn down North River Road, and Boyce & Sons is over here. And this is reported to be one of David McFarland's house. It's where the White House bed and breakfast was on North River Road. And these gentlemen are looking at this beautiful view, and the Dr. Pierce barn is right there, and it hasn't been painted yet. So this is a really cool picture. And I have a lot of favorite pictures.
Can you show us where the reservoir, the reservoir that's, where that would be on that?
Well, it would be behind them. Yeah. And I don't think I put the slide in where you could actually see the reservoir, but I do have one taken from Knox Butte looking over to...
So this is actually joint Arts Hill?
No. This is Cerro Gordo.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so they're above McFarland Cemetery looking northeast.
Got it, okay.
So as Dana said, this talk is sponsored by the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society, and when you research people, you end up researching where they lived as well. And I grew up here, so I just have a love for Cottage Grove and its past. And I want to give special thanks to David Voss, because he was the one that spearheaded the movement and the efforts to get our downtown on the National Historic Registry. And also Marcia Allen, Kin, and I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name, Gazowski, and the Cottage Grove Historical Society, Joanne Skelton, George LaVoice, and the Cottage Grove was the Cottage Grove Planning Director, the same kind of position that Faye Stewart has now. Elizabeth Simone for the copy layout, Sue Trick for the cover design, and Pen and Press printed it. And I want to mention that before 1912, we didn't have any addresses in Cottage Grove. It was just a description. We had street names, but those all changed in 1912 as well. So to know where a building was before 1912, you had to decipher any directions that were in the directory, or if they said the Martin building, well, which Martin? N.H. Martin, Willard Martin? There were other Martins, so it was really hard to decipher where things were. So here's the First National Bank of Cottage Grove, and it says it's on Main, southeast corner of 4th. Well, at this time, 4th is now 6th Street. So you have to do all of that in your brain too. And then for the Woodard family, this is your grandmother's uncle, Henry Fisher. And I didn't notice this until today, that he also had something to do with the Cottage Grove Manufacturing Company, let alone be the manager of Brown Lumber Company.
Thank you, Deborah. Never knew that.
And so I'm going to start at the bridge, which means bridges. And the first bridge that we had, we do not have a picture of, because the article says that in 1882, they replaced the covered bridge that sat where our Main Street bridge is now, or where the replica of the bridge is. So this is North River Road. Main Street runs right through there. And for Dana, I put, this is where the flour mill was at that time. And this picture was from 1884. And then Joanne Skelton and I took this photograph and tried to date it based on what's in the picture and what's not in the picture. And so we deduced down to it's looking over Lematai in 1895, but you can see the covered bridge in the picture. And James Polk Curran built the first walking bridge, and Dana gave a really good talk on him, so you should watch that. And I think that one's on the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society's YouTube channel. And this is how they used to cross the river before the bridges were built. They would find a place where they could cross, and they called them fords. And in blowing this picture up, I noticed you can see the walking bridge. And so between this picture, about 1906-07, and this picture, and again, down here, is the walking bridge. So Dana and I looked at this together, and we concluded that this ford was where the Prospector Park is. And you know, you look at that now and you can't imagine anybody trying to cross there. But you know, that was 100+ years ago. And so the river's changed. We have dams now, and it looked a lot different then. And this picture is very scenic, and it's in the Cottage Grove Commercial Club's 1909 book. And the Cottage Grove Genealogical Society replicated this book in 2005, and we have 7 issues left. And unfortunately, the printer lost our files, so those are the last 7, but I brought 4 tonight if anyone's interested. And so here's a later bridge, but it is still the same covered bridge. In 1900, the county said they were going to build Cottage Grove a new bridge over Main Street. But what they ended up doing is prior to 1900, they removed the housing off. They took all the sides and the roof off. And they were supposed to replace the bridge, but they ended up coming and shoring it up, reinforcing it, and they said, that's it. That's what you get. And if you notice, the buildings are built out over the river. And behind the bridge, you see the church that used to sit, the Methodist church that used to sit there, and the steeple is right there. And there's something else in this picture that we would never do today. So right there and right there, those are outhouses. So we had another bridge built in 1913. And it was, you see on the 1912 Sanborn, this is what ends up being North 9th Street. The maps didn't go that far, but there's no bridge here. And then in 1920, you can see there's a bridge. And that is where the Woodson Bridge is now. So it's the first stoplight as you're going north on North 9th Street. And then how I found this, well, I found this reference to Manitou Park, but thanks to you guys, look who was the owners of this, was A.L. Woodard, Ella Woodard, and R.E. Walker, with John Woodard was the manager. They created this addition to these developments, these 2 right here. And this bridge made that really prime real estate. And that was in 1913, and this ad is from 1913 as well.
So where is that exactly?
Okay, here, this is Woodson Bridge. So there's a stoplight right there, I'm sorry.
I got the Elks Lodge.
Yeah, the Elks Lodge is on the other side, yeah. So this is North 9th, and you go on down and you can get over the overpass. So that was a steel bridge in 1913. And then there was a 1914 article that said that they were building a wooden bridge at Tyler Avenue. And so I got the 20 Sanborn out, or the 20 Sanborn out, and there is a bridge there. And I'd never noticed it before. And it said in the article that they used some timbers and iron rods that were donated by the city, recycled from the old bridge, because in a minute you'll see that the Main Street got a steel bridge in 1914 as well. But I had no idea about this bridge. And so this is the steel bridge that was built in 1914. This picture is from 1953, and it's showing where they're going to build a bridge in the location it is now. And I like to just look at interesting facts. I thought, well, if the wooden bridge was there, and we currently have a bridge at Harrison, where was the Chambers Railroad Bridge built? And it was built at the end of Tyler as well. So this is what we have now, and then this great Centennial Bridge that was put on the pilings or the abutments for the original covered bridge. And so during the survey, they rated the buildings downtown, and they needed enough that were primary to be considered for the National Historic Registry. And so the way they did it was from Main Street, up the north side, crossed over at the river, and then down from 9th Street to the river on the north side, and then the south side from the river down. And so these maps, the numbers don't quite work out, but so what I did over here is I listed all of the buildings that are numbered and whether they were compatible, non-historic, compatible, or secondary. And there are none at the oldest part of Main Street. This is the river, the bridge, that were primary. And some of these dates have changed based on my research compared to what they were on the original survey, basically because we have the access to those great newspapers that we can word search, and they were having to read the newspapers.
Deborah?
Yes?
When did they change the name of the river? When did they start using the name Coast Fork as opposed to Willamette and everything?
Well, they would say the Willamette River, but they would say the Coast Fork. Route River was the North Fork of the East Fork.
Never mind.
Yeah. So this church was built and dedicated in 1900, and this is what sat at the end of Main Street. You can see the configuration here. And it was dedicated in 1900, and our resident brickmaker, Charles Hamilton Wallace, also took part in that dedication. And the new church was built on Washington behind this church, and it was, they held their first service in 1949, and the old church was torn down in 1950. And so at this time period in 1910, this picture was taken at Grove Studio, and this was the photographer, Ari Armstrong. He just went by AJ, but here's his little shop. And he's an interesting person. He first started his working career to support his family as a miller in a flour mill. And unfortunately, he had a terrible accident and lost one hand and part of another. And so he decided that he'd always wanted to go to seminary school, so he became a preacher. And then he developed a problem with his voice. And so he studied photography and made a living in photography until his eyes got weak. And then he ended his career as a rural circulation manager for the Morning Register, which is the Register Guard. And there was a great article about him in the newspaper about what a dedicated person he was to his family. He never complained about his ailments. He always looked forward and was always lifting people up. So in this, you can see how prominent the church was at the end of the street. You'd go down Main and you'd have to take a right to go across the river. And this picture, Andy Nelson, I think I have it on another slide, but Andy Nelson went to the World's Fair in 1893 in Chicago and learned about electricity and come back and lit Cottage Grove, and then later lit the Bohemia mines too. And I want to mention that the Griffin and Beach Hardware is right here, and that's about where the City Hall is, right in there, but that's where the Bank of Cottage Grove first started. And this is what it looked like inside, and this is Stacy's Covered Bridge building. And they built this in 1906. And they had a really interesting idea to put the manganese steel safe on a platform inside the window so people could see how safe their money was.
That's a great story.
And a lot of, yes, A lot of people mix up the Bank of Cottage Grove and the First National Bank. They are totally separate banks. And I want to note my pitch for digitizing historical newspapers. You can tell this microfilm was one that was starting to degrade from all of these little dots that are on it. I love this picture. You've got the Bank of Cottage Grove. You've got the wooden IOOF building. You have a hat shop here, and it was owned by S. Margaret Hunt. I put the addresses in just for your reference because there were no addresses then. And then we have the Bank of Cottage Grove, Lurch's front yard, their house set back on this lot, and their store. And on this side, we have a bakery and lunch counter owned by M.A. Hoxie. I couldn't find who owned the oil and gasoline garage, but the harness emporium was Curtis W. Beals. And this is the Lurch's home on that lot. And you can see the old high school back here, or the old West Side School, or East Side School. But the Lurches were immigrants from Germany, and they were the first merchants to take a chance and build something and start doing business on the east side of the Coast Fork. And this ad is from 1908, and I think it would make a great mural somewhere in Cottage Grove. And so this view, someone stood up on top of the building, and it's 1912, and you can see the arc lights down Main Street. But look at how the trees have grown up in the yard of the Lurches, and they'd have benches so people could stroll down Main Street and rest in the shade. And in this house was moved to 412 Adams, and our friend Gerald Santana's family restored that before they moved to Oakland. They lived in this house, and that's the address now. And Earl Hill is the one that purchased this property from the Lurches, and he's the one that moved the house. This is a great shot, and it shows the extreme turn at Main Street. And you can see that the IOOF is in the process of being built. Our new old City Hall is being built also. You can see the lumber company that encompasses all of Bohemia Park. Here's the Cottage Grove manufacturing plant. There's the cement wigwam burner. And these trees are Coiner Park. So this is within the first block from City Hall would be right about in here. And so we have Harry Rental's bicycle shop, the Shorts building, and it was removed in the 70s. I remember going in it, and it was removed after, I think after Tom and I got married, yeah. And then the Bargain House here, and that was owned by Francis McLaughlin. And this set of buildings over here, the Arcade, J.C. Penney's, Bressler's Furniture, and then an insurance office here. And Earl Hill in 1924 built all of this. He was a developer, and this is where the Lurch's business was and their yard. And here's another view of this. Here's the Arcade, J.C. Penney's, and the furniture store. And we have Mountain Power in the IOF and Dolman's Bakery. I love these trucks. They've got wooden crates with the pop bottles on them. But I think that's a great view of down Main Street. And at this time, Main Street went straight up the hill. There was no turn by Bimart. It went straight up the hill. All that's on this side of the street now is the City Hall and the building where Territorial Seat is, which was the First National Bank Cottage Grove branch. And unfortunately, in 1963, there was a devastating fire that started in Carl Rich's paint store, behind the Arcade Theater. And the projectionist, Wayne Eastburn, was the first to report the fire, but it destroyed everything from the insurance clear to the end of the block. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but all three, the 2 stores and the theater were a total loss. And Earl Hill said that he had it insured and that he would think about rebuilding, but he never did. And this part stayed empty until later when State Savings and Loan had a spot there. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So across the street from there was Diane Theater, and that was named for Crip Morlock's daughter, and later called the Arcade in my young teens, but it was here. And then there was a service station where the First National Bank building was built. And here's the First National Bank building in 1953. And when I was a young teen and we would get downtown too early and it was raining, we'd stand in here to stay out of the rain. And it still says Diane on this sign, but it was called the Arcade when I was a young teen. And again, we're going to now move into the blocks of between 5th and 6th Street. And so these are the slots that were considered primary, and we needed enough of those to get us on the National Registry. So let's look at some of those. This is a very early photograph, and I want to again thank the Cottage Grove Museum for their great collection of pictures. And you can see this is the cement railing on top of what used to be on top of the Flying Monkeys when it was a 2-story building. So this was taken from up there. And this is a great view of the Stewart Porter building. You can see Swindle's Hardware is where Griffin and Beach Hardware was. And these wooden buildings were later in 1913 replaced with a brick building. And this had the Western Telephone and Telegraph and the Modern Pharmacy.
So Deborah, is that where the road takes that dive to go across the river, right? The river's down there?
Way down there.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
thanks.
Yep. So this is what the Flying Monkeys building looked like before 1974. It's a gorgeous building. I love this picture of these girls in the street. This building was built in 1907, and it was housed the Powell and Company, or Powell and Hemingway, Powell and another person, but I can't remember their name. The next building is called the Lawson Building, and he's an interesting person. He was in the Spanish-American War, and he is credited for helping to bring the National Guard to Cottage Grove. This is a busy picture, but it's a great picture too. So this is the Arcade Theater. In 1913, they built this building, and at that time it was a state-of-the-art theater. And then we have where Quality Meats was, where Jack Spratz is. And then the Madison building, and the Allison brothers were barbers. And that west slot has been a barber shop, I think, forever, or a beauty shop forever. And then the other side was a jewelry store. And then the Stewart Porter building, of course, with the Pacific Telephone and Telegraph and Modern Pharmacy. And you can't quite see the hotel building in this picture. And so down further, besides the Lawson building, you have the Elite Confectionery and Grable's Harness and Shoe Shop, and then the nice building that the First National Bank built that is now the Soulsby's residence. And here's a later shot of the Arcade building and Quality Market, and again the wooden building that is still there. And I don't know if any of you remember, this pole has been there until about 15 years ago. It's a wooden pole, and it was very bent by the time they took it down. Whoops.
What was it for? Lightning rod?
I have no idea.
One direction.
Yeah. And we have the Stuart Porter building as well. And that is AKA the Crawford Hotel. Then the Western Telegraph, the Modern Pharmacy is still there. But Claude Kim took down the Hotel Oregon and put in this building in 1923. This is gives you a good idea of what it looked like in 1904. The J.I. Jones Bank building that Lynn Blackstone restored is here. And where the First National Bank of Cottage Grove built the nice big building that the Soulsbys have is here. And then this was probably a harness shop. And this is Davis Hall. That's where all the entertainment happened before we had moving pictures.
Deborah, are those phone or power poles?
We had phones in 1905.
But power came, it looks like there's transformers on it.
Yes, we had power. Yep. Yeah, 1925 we had power. We had power in 1904 too. We had the arc lights going down Main Street. So I know this picture is prior to 1925 because the Bank of Cottage Grove removed the second-story west bay window in a remodel in 1925, and it's still there in this picture. This is a great candid picture. They're possibly waiting for the 4th of July parade. This is about 1920. And the Elite Bakery or Confectionery they're standing in front of, and this is Grable's Harness and Shoe Shop. And so now we're going to go through a little bit of what's in this picture. The arcade building is John's Cafe, and sharing that building is the Grove Hardware. Then we have the Barber. We have H. Star Jewelers instead of Madsen. And we have the Crawford Hotel, and the Grey Goose Cafe is in the Chem building. I think it's in the Chem building. Or is it part of the Crawford Hotel? I'd have to double check. I think it's in the Chem building upstairs, or later it's important for Corey Bartell when he first started. And on this side we have the Bohemian Tavern in the Flying Monkeys building. And the proprietor was Mabel Gates. The Cottage Bakery was owned by William Vielman. And the next is a cafe sign, and it's in the directory I found that's owned by Rex Cafe. And this is a little coin purse that I have. It's only about 4 inches tall, and this is the men's togery shop right here. And that's what it says inside of it. It was purchased at this store. So in the 1940s, we had Webb's Hardware, we had Smith's Electric, Quality Meats was there for a long time, and then a shoe repair. We had the Barber, a shoe repair, and I remember shoe repair until in the 70s, maybe even 80s. And the club, this is the first time we see the club sign. And we have the Crawford Hotel sign, and then the Rexall Drugs in the Kim building. And this, in the 40s, the Bohemian is now Kahn's Tavern. And there's Arnest Insurance, the men's togery is still there, Cottage Bakery, and notice these street lights. We are going back to this same style on the renovation of our Main Street now. So we're adding something historical to Main Street. Yeah.
What's a men's togery? Is that clothing?
It was men's furnishings, hats, clothes.
Togas?
Togas, maybe. So this is kind of a busy picture, but this is in the 50s, and I have a dear friend of my husband's that I send the pictures to, and he helps me date the pictures based on all the cars that are there. But we still have Smith Electric, Grove Hardware, the club, Crawford Hotel. The tavern doesn't have a name because this Bonds is a furniture store. But I did find a listing for an S.B. Scarcy at this address, a tavern at this address, but it didn't say the name of the tavern. And again, the men's togery shop, the Cottage Bakery, and you can see the Grove Tavern sign in here. And the historical is Holly here, because I think it was 1954 or 55 when the Grove Tavern started, and it's the longest, same name, same type of business on Main Street. So this is a great picture by the photographer Nichols in 1902. And all that's on Main Street that you can see that's a brick building is the Hotel Oregon. It was built before 1893, our earliest Sanborn. And the Garment and Hemingway building was built in 1902. And so this is 6th Street going right through here.
So that was Mr. Doherty's office up there, right?
Well, not in this building, but in that footprint, yes. And at this time, in 1902, there were only 3 brick buildings on Main Street. And we're in the footprint of one of them, but it wasn't this version of Burkholder. It was Burkholder and Lewis at that time, and it was a 1-story building. And I added a map here so you can see. There was some kind of brick storeroom there, but here's the Hotel Oregon, and this is 6th Street, used to be 4th Street. And this is the footprint of the Knickerbocker building. And then here we are in the Burkholder Woods or Burkholder Lewis. And this little thing at this time was a drugstore, and it was the first version of Modern Pharmacy with David Griggs. And I'd love to do a history pub sometime on him. He was a very fascinating young man. He did a lot of wonderful things. He lived in the footprint of one of our members' homes, and he died very young, unfortunately. So this is looking the other way because you can see the church down here. But I'm always a stickler for looking at more than one source. And I'd seen this picture in a few publications, and I wondered about these shadows in the street. You know, there's no telephone poles, but we saw them back in the other ones. And so it's a prime example to look at more than one source. But yep, this has been altered by an artist.
Really? Been altered?
Yes, it's been altered. And I'll show you what it's supposed to look like. This is the actual picture, and we have the power poles and phone, but you can see the arc lights in the middle. You don't see a prominent steeple down here, but it's the same little girl and man stepping off the curb as that one. It's Photoshop of the day. Now this is the Main Street that I remember growing up. Yep, Knickerbockers. So we had Leo Wilhelm's Rexall Drugs. We had Knickerbockers. Over here we have Maury's. Did you go to Maury's? Yep. Yeah, ice cream. Yep. And it started out as Gustafson's. And did you know that Dutch Girl ice cream started in Cottage Grove? Dutch Girl did. It was this family that opened their first ice cream store in this slot here. And their ice cream became so popular, they moved back to Eugene, where Mr. Gustafson had brothers, and they started Dutch Girl ice cream. And there's a Mrs. Workman, and I don't remember her maiden name, but she was their example that she'd put, the hat on for the Dutch Girl ice cream logo. Yes. 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 And so we have Thriftwise Drugs, KC Drugs, Peterson's, and Wolford's Market is in the Burkholder Woods building in this picture. And Ware's Jewelers is here where Applin's was, and now it's an empty storefront, and it was Britt's Jewelers. Now we're going to go back in time a little bit. This is looking north on 6th Street. And this is the Church of Christ before it was a brick building. And this is a 4th of July parade, and WOW stands for Woodmen of the World. It was, at that time, it was a life insurance, and now they're into other securities. But this was the Knox home, and they donated the land for the Church of Christ. And this, I love this picture. It's an actual photograph. It's not a picture postcard. And it was taken 2 years after the General was filmed here. And if the genealogical company Ancestry would have extracted the license plates numbers, I could have told you who owned that. But they did their license, their physical license, not the license plates, and their registration. But at this time in the Knickerbocker building, it was a battery station or battery service station, and they actually were pumping gas on Main Street. And when they started this revitalization, I was asked to let them know if I knew of all the gas stations that used to be downtown. And I gave them a list of the ones that I knew. But then later I noticed on a Sanborn that there was a buried gas tank in Main Street. And so I let them know so they could be careful digging just in case it stayed there. And the Kim building is only about 5 years old, and there were apartments upstairs at that time, and they were called Omar Apartments. And that was Claude Kim's dad's first name, and he named the apartments after his dad. This is the concept drawing for the First National Bank of Cottage Grove, and this was built in 1911, but this is a beautiful concept drawing. And this is courtesy of Danny Soulsby. And there's a booklet at the museum that goes through their 21st anniversary of the bank. And this is what it looked like when they first opened in that building. And they imported the mahogany and the marble for the inside counter. And now we're going to move from down the block between 6th and 7th Street. And again, these are the buildings that were deemed primary at that time. And here's a picture of J.I. Jones that built this building, the bank building. This used to be called the J.I. Jones building or the Jones building. And then the Phillips building, this was built in 04, this was built in 08. And then there's some confusion about what this building is called. In the historic survey, it was called the Weiser building, but it was built by Mr. Bensky. He built some other things in town too. And it was built in 1909. And then I've told you guys a million times at History Pub that we're in this building, and they occupied it in December of 1908. So, and this is probably 1905, and the building is complete. And like I said, this is the J.I. Jones Bank building, built in 1904. And mayors were known to address the community from this balcony, but there wasn't a door, so they had to step out of the window. And at this time, upstairs, Dr. Oglesby had his office, and this was Medley and Johnson attorneys, and Medley was a mayor at one time too. That's probably how it started. He was the mayor and he did it. And then down here was Welch and Wood's clothing store on the main floor, and the First National Bank of Cottage Grove was here. And they started in the Eakin and Bristow building on the other side of the river. They started doing banking there. And in 1904, Darwin Bristow moved back to Eugene, and Herb Eakin and Tom Wheeler kept on banking in Cottage Grove. That is the hose drying tower behind where the City Hall was on 6th Street. But that's the fire hose. That's what I said. That's where the City Hall, yeah. Yeah. And there was also a calaboose there. The jailhouse was there too. That's what they called the jail. So here is the bank building again, and it was remodeled by the Bank of Cottage Grove, and the clock was added in late 1925. And unfortunately, this bank failed, and most depositors received 10 cents on the dollar. It just didn't survive the stock market crash. And at this time, we had Dr. Jewell was the dentist upstairs, White's Drugs. The Bank of Cottage Grove occupied this, and they imported this marble from back east when they remodeled. And the clock was auctioned off by the order of Judge Skipworth. This clock was auctioned off because he wanted the depositors to get every penny they could get. And I found where the clock went. It went to an Elks Lodge in Springfield. I was actually asked to see if I could pursue that, but I don't think that's worth my time.
Is there any chance the bank failed partly because of oily and the sale of that crazy stock?
This is too late. This is too late, yeah. But this is what it looked like inside of the J.I. Jones building when it was the First National Bank of Cottage Grove. And we have Worth Harvey, Herb Aiken, and Bob Cooley worked in the bank.
Hey Deborah, was that Cy Aiken's dad? Do you know?
It was his uncle,
Okay.
because he didn't. Herb didn't have any children, but Cy took over banking after him. Yeah. And this is what it looked like behind the counter.
Wow. That looks like a movie, you know?
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Think about it.
And then we have Worth Harvey, E.E. Wyatt, Herb Aiken, and or Eakin, and T.C. Wheeler, Tom Wheeler.
Wow.
And again, here we are. This is 1912. Now this picture is about 1905. It was sent to the Historical Society several years ago, a little itty bitty autograph book that had a few photographs in it. And Katie Vaughn and I had fun trying to figure out what was what. But this is the Garment and Hemingway General Merchandise Store, built in 1901-02. And this is from 6th Street looking east. And this building caught fire in 1908, and they were unable to restore it. There was too much damage in the timbers that were inside. And so a new building was built in 1909. But this is all wooden. Here's the book mine down here. So this is that building. And I showed this picture to Eric Mongan, our past city planner, and he was so excited because this building sticks out 5 feet more than the rest. And he couldn't figure out why there was an anomaly getting ready for the grant funding for our revitalization. And they had to do a whole bunch of quick research because there was 5 feet on all these lots that the business or the building owners never paid taxes on, but the city didn't own them, they did. So they had to do quitclaim deeds quickly to make this happen. But he loved this, that proved, you know, why there was that anomaly. This was one of the first buildings, and they just put it where they wanted to, I guess. So this is the first building there, and Ryan Thomas is restoring the second building. And so here's the first building. And then this is the second building. It's in the process of being built. And you can see that they've moved it back. This is the Bartels Meat Company.
And that's where Mr. Doherty had his office.
He had it upstairs in this building, yes, yes. And so they put it in line with this brick building. And this one is still set way back. It was set way back here as well. Just want to make sure I mentioned everything I wanted to.
That's a different Bartels than the meat family?
No, this is same family.
Okay, wow.
Yep.
Okay.
So this was the Garment and Hemingway is what they called this building. And the new one is the Beach and Wheeler building. And so here you can see they still have all these bricks in the street. I think this is a great picture. But they went to great lengths to really make this fireproof. And it had 12-inch walls. And I did a timeline for Ryan on this building, and he was really disappointed it wasn't as old as he thought it was. But I think he would really enjoy this article, and I need to get him that article. And so this is an early version of the arcade in the Beach and Wheeler building, aka Knickerbocker building. And you can see the arch here. It's the same arch as in this picture. And this is about 1911, and they must be grading the road because there's a pile of rubble there and a lot of stuff down on the south side of Main Street. And this is the Book Mine building, and it has a drugstore in there. It's New Era drugstore, I think. And this is Mr. Wilson's restaurant, J.H. Bartels, and then there's a furniture store in there. I'll get to that one. So here's a more modern picture. This picture is 1945. And Fred Knickerbocker, do many of you remember him? He managed the Darling Variety Store here for 8 years, and he took it over and purchased it in 1939. Then we have Monahan's Optometrists and Jewelers in the jewelry store building, and they opened in 1945. This in April, so 2 months after the jewelry store was changed hands, in April, our community took part in a United Nations clothing drive, and this was how they advertised it.
There's a brassiere up there.
Yeah. They let it all hang out. I just think it's a great picture. And so this is the Bartels building here. So this article I found quite a few years ago, and I just couldn't figure it out because it said that the east wing of the Helena Saloon building is being cut off to allow for the west party wall of the Bartel Meats being built. Well, I knew that was built in 1905. This article is from 05. And so I just couldn't figure it out. And so on the 1903 Sanborn, you had a saloon, the meat market, and these are before the brick buildings were built. So, and then down here you had a saloon we've always been told was the Helena, and Imperial Hotel and Saloon, and another saloon. So if the meat market's here, yes, this is what you would call the red light district. If the meat market was taking down this wall, that meant the Helena was there, right? Guess what? Helena, the meat market building before they built the brick. This is 1902. Look at all the grass in the street. Why aren't those horses mowing our street? And here is the Garment and Hemingway building, and they have their awning out on this one, and you see the last two of Hemingway here. And Mr. Wilson's restaurant, it says Wilson's Restaurant on that one. And they're blocking our view to see what it says about Bartels. So, but I just I found this one day at the museum, and it was a Xerox copy in their files. And I asked Tara Sue, I go, there's no source on this, where's the original picture? And she goes, I don't know, I've never even noticed it before. So, I mean, they have enough, I understand that. And so, a couple weeks ago, I met with Kathy Walmsley over there, and they have the original picture as well. It's in the annex, hanging on the boards. But here's a better picture. It says Helena, the Helena. And this footprint is where Britt's Jewelers is today. But I'm going to say this because Gail has a certificate for the National Registry that says her building was the Helena. So this doesn't prove that the Helena wasn't at the book mine. It only shows it was here at this time. And Gail knows I was spilling the beans. So we're still in that same block, but where the fair is the brick building that was built where the Helena was, and then the Bartell meets. But this is a busy picture, and when I cleaned this picture up when I had my recovery from ankle surgery a few years ago. But there's a bicycle in here somewhere, but I can't see it on the screen. But there's a train, you've got a horse and wagon, a transfer with a horse team, and they're hauling something either in or out of either the meat market or the furniture store, and then a car. And I sure wish they would have extracted those license plates. And the fair was like a variety store. But I want to mention something about Consuelo Heckman Wright. I biffed that there. She was the wife of James Wright, and he was the son of the original fair store owners. And I got a call one day from the Pioneer Museum next to the old Mac Court, and the keeper of the names and the papers there asked me, do you know who this Consuelo Wright is? And I hadn't heard of her. So I did some research and discovered that she was the wife of the son of the owners of this store. And he died early in 1958, and she lived almost to 100. They had moved to Los Angeles. He was a playwright. And when he died, they shipped his body here. He's buried next to his parents at Fir Grove, but she stayed down there. And when the whole time that it was Ware's Jewelers and all of those jewelry stores, the Brits building, she was their landlord down in California. And in fact, when Tim Schweitzer and Brittany bought the building, they bought it from her estate. Yeah. I just thought that was a sweet thing that, this woman hung on to that property her whole life. This is it says it's the Woodard building, and it really had Casey going. He thought it was their family building until I told him that the name is spelt wrong. It's the Woodward building. And it was, this was right after it was built. It was built in 1910-11. But the first stores that I found in advertising that had moved in here was Kaufman Willard Barbers, H.C. Cook Grocery, Shoes, Crockery, Gloves, I think, and Underwear. And I typed it as it was written in the ad. And then Woodward Real Estate, DJ Scholl Jeweler, Counter and Walker Attorneys. The fair moved into this building. And Medley also moved out of the bank building into this building. And that's the first mention that I saw of a veterinarian in Cottage Grove, Mr. Owens. And there's Mr. Wilson's restaurant building is still there. That old wooden building is still sandwiched in between all of those beautiful brick buildings. And here's another view. This is also the Woodward building. And Earl Hill the one that I told you moved the Lurch's house and built those buildings at the end of the street. He was also a semi-pro, is that right? Semi-pro? Professional baseball player in Canada. And he also had a cigar store here in town, the Eagle cigar store. But in this picture, I looked up United Cigars and found that he had became an agent for them. And I wonder if he got paid extra or a better discount for putting their brand out on the street. But I love this picture. It's a great picture. The fair is still down there because this is the article's 1920. It says the picture is too, but the fair had moved into here. I don't know. Maybe they hadn't moved the sign yet. That happens. So now we have the Humphrey and Mackins, C.J. Breyers. Both of them were dry goods. One sold groceries, one sold clothing. We have Milady's Beauty Shop, the Grove Pharmacy, White's Lunch Counter. Good old, it's now, well, White's Lunch Counter was Mr. Wilson. And then we have the meat market, the fair, and the service garage. Maybe they didn't last long in the other building. So I do want to say something about this building. In 1902, Mr. Wilson purchased the building that he'd been renting from Willard Martin. And in May 1930, the edition of the Sentinel reported that this building was the old Congregational Church that used to sit down at Main Street by the covered bridge. That was the very first building of a church. And a lot of the different denominations shared that building before they built their own. And it was moved sometime between 1898 and 1903. Now we're getting into times we remember. And this is McCoy's Pharmacy. And Mr. Farron is here that was part owner of that at one time too. Yes, thank you. And in 1975, who do you think's this person walking in the middle of the street? I can't remember now if I actually made it a trivia question or not, but it's Gail's husband from the book Mine. Greg, yeah. And then unfortunately, there was a devastating fire in December, right after Christmas in 1989. And Gail shared all these clippings with me. And it was suspected arson, and Catherine Fillmore perished in the fire. And this was in the newspaper at the time. It says it was taken in 1910 and shows a large part of the area destroyed in Wednesday night's fire. But it also had this, that the buildings that burned go back a long ways. And you can see the Bartell Meat Company, Mr. Wilson's, the Book Mine, the Imperial Hotel. And this is Mrs. Fillmore. She was an art teacher at Cottage Grove High School until 1969, and then afterwards she mentored a lot of artists. And it was just really devastating and sad that she died in the fire. So this was just devastating for Cottage Grove. I remember the day it happened. It was just sad. And one of these says it looked like World War II downtown. I mean, it's just, here's the Christmas decoration, and the police did say it was arson, but they never ever could prove who. We all have our speculations, but there's two buildings that are between 7th and 8th Street that are primary. I titled this, Between 7th and 8th is where a lot of wild history happened in Cottage Grove, including cows going down Main Street. So here you have the edge of the Fashion Stables. Here you have one of those saloon buildings. By 1912, it was not. The Imperial Hotel building and the Book Mine. In 1905, there was a census done in Cottage Grove. It was called a military census, but they counted everybody. They listed everybody. But unfortunately, we didn't have any addresses, so we don't know where anybody lived. But it did list who owned saloons. They had their occupations. And so we had J.N. Jones, Thomas Blue, William Perlman, John Barber, John Gross, Gus Gross, John Crowley, Lee Menard, and he was the first one when we went dry to break the law, and he skipped town. Charles Case, Neil Cummings, Bernard O'Neill. And note there's a female boarding house behind these 3 saloons. A female boarding house? So there was a lot happening in Cottage Grove at that time, and I think I have it in the next slide. But in October of 1906, the city voted to go dry. The vote was very narrow, three votes. They voted again in December, and this time the margin was higher, so they left the original vote to go dry, and we were dry within the city limits of Cottage Grove from October of 1906 all the way through the end of Prohibition in 1933. So that's why we have all those moonshiners up the river. So many of you know about Eva Davenport or have heard about Eva Davenport. In 2020, we had a patron at the Historical Society. I was working in the library. We were cleaning up files, and I was volunteering over there and the Genealogical Society. And a lady come in and wanted to know if she could research something, and she wanted to know stuff about Eva Davenport. And yes, she was a lady of the evening, but she was reading an article written in the Bohemia Nugget in 1965 by a Mr. Hubert, and it mentioned him viewing the faded pages of her diary at the Gypsy antique store north of town. And she goes, "Where's the diary?" And we're all looking like, I don't know, we didn't know about a diary. And so it made me start thinking, and I did a deep, deep dive into her as a genealogist. Because nobody knew who her real name was. Lena Filaski Becker. They knew she had married a Becker, that Eva Davenport was married to a Becker, Gary Becker, but they didn't know where she came from, who her parents, how did she end up here? And so I did the research, and Holly Turpin wrote the story, and it's called Unconventional: The Woman Who Changed Cottage Grove. The temperance movement was really taking off in Cottage Grove. Ordinances were being written to where the saloons could not close their doors if they were open, so people could see who was visiting the saloon. And our town was changing from the rough and ready mining town to family-oriented timber town, and timber jobs brought families. And Lee Menard, the owner of the Bohemia Tavern, he preyed on vulnerable women. And if you're interested in her story, I do have some of the books here tonight. They're $9, and you can read the rest of her story. And if you want to look at the research and the copies of original records that I got from Wisconsin, Minnesota, Canada. She married Edwin Gary Becker in Canada. We don't know why. I know when her last communion was at her family church, which was a Trinity Lutheran church. And Lee Menard has a story too, and I plan on doing some deep dive research on him because I personally in my heart believe he murdered her, but she died like at 3 o'clock in the morning, and by 6 there was a coroner's jury gathered, and they said she committed suicide. And she had seen a client in her house, and I didn't put it, so here's the saloons, the 3 saloons here, and the female boarding house is right about there. She had bought this house and was living in that house. And she saw a client, and his testimony is in the coroner's report and in the newspaper. They published it all in the newspaper. And he paid her, but when they searched her home, there was not 1 cent in that house. And then I think Lee Menard, she had a bad gash on her head, but it was a suicide. But anyway, it's a very interesting story, and we have the books here available if you're interested. But she is, I think her death was the turning point. And so miners came to spend their earnings. Liquor was free flowing at that time. Some women were hoping to strike it rich as well. Unfortunately, neither were all that lucky. And we had several professional gamblers who were ready to take the miners' gold. And Herb Leonard was one that was in Eva's story. And I was just curious about what happened to some of these people after we went dry. And I picked up his trail in Idaho, and he was divorced. He was in the Guard in Idaho in Company K. But the sad truth is, at age 34, he drank himself to death. Cause of death of the 34-year-old was severe alcoholism. And he's one of the characters, like I said, in Eva's story. He was with Flossie that night that she died. And one of the two owners of the Imperial Hotel was Neil Cummings, and he was charged with seduction under a promise of marriage. The seduced, Mary Bartell, had recently given birth to his child. He was indicted by grand jury. Bail was set at $500. He was found guilty, but had skipped town, forfeiting his bond. The son grew up to be a very renowned dentist in Portland. And I credit the Bartells for that, because they helped her raise him. And these are just two of the stories that I found while researching this time period before we were dry. There was lots more. Some were even gruesome, but save those for when we get the lady back that does the Halloween stories. So now I'm going to get into where exactly was the Bohemia Saloon. In this picture, there are 17 men, and we've seen this picture. It's painted on the side of the Great Western Pub. And at the museum, on the back of this picture, it has part of a name. I think it's Groot, but I'm not sure. And it says Bentley, Bohemia Sharp, which that's Bohemia Sharp behind this guy. A bartender, Lee Menard, the saloon keeper, Phil Spahn, Bake Stewart. We've always been under the impression that that's his prize bull. John Yarnell, Charlie, excuse me, but that's what it says on there. And Billy Wallace, Jim Lyle, they called him Tennessee Jim. Then there's a name I couldn't quite make out, and Arch Conley. But there's only 15 people listed, and it definitely doesn't go left to right, because he would not be where he is in this list. But this has always bothered me. I've always seen this as a cropped picture. I've never seen a full uncropped picture. And without addresses, when an R.A. Saunders come to town, it almost sounded like the Bohemia Saloon was on the west side of the river. And Lee Menard bought the Bohemia Saloon in 1902, and there's reference of a Martin building, but it wasn't Mr. Wilson's restaurant building, because he'd had that for a long, long time. So I didn't know. And but I was so excited to see this because it finally gave me confirmation of something that I wondered about. And so this line, if a photographer was standing right here and taking this picture of these guys, do you see what you see back here? Some buildings, but they don't look like houses. There's it blown up. This picture's in really poor condition. But if he was standing in front of the Bohemia Saloon taking the picture, there were more barns to this livery stable. There was a one-story long barn and a two-story barn hooked to it. And I think that's the long barn, and that's the top of the two-story building. So I'm pretty confident in saying that that is where the Bohemia Saloon was. And then Fashion Stables was actually a really big going concern, and they also had the stage lines to Bohemia and Black Butte. And this ad is from an 1899 newspaper. And there was also some news, said Fashion Stables sent out a team to Bohemia Camps Monday with 4 mining experts from abroad. So our mines were looked at larger than Oregon or in the United States. And then on the other side of the street, we have the Stuart Hines building where, in my day, it was Pioneer Hardware. That's this building here. And Knowles and Grabber had just moved to this building from down the street in July. And Cimarron and Vandenberg, that furniture store that was in the Brits Jewelers building, Consuelo Wright's building, the Helena, they had just moved their merchandise in here too. And here's another Stables. And in September, just days after they moved their stuff, it caught on fire and it threatened this whole block. And it says the fire laddies and citizens saved it, but it says in this article, it's really hard to read on this screen, but the Thompson Hotel building in the back caught fire twice and they were able to put it out, but there wasn't any major damage, which was good news. So now we're getting down to North 9th Street and Main Street. This is a map that shows where the highway goes through, but it's much later. And so here's a view from the railroad about 1910. We've got a nice advertisement on this building, but it's hard, you can't read what it says. This building was the Spray building. It was built in 1908. It was all kinds of different businesses. But you can't really tell much of what's going on down there. In 1913, William B. Cooper, and his nickname was Billy, built the Cottage Grove Hotel building, but he didn't finish the top stories. He built the building on speculation, and Reese and Wallace Dry Goods, that was in the old Pioneer Hardware or Stuart Hines building down the street, moved in, and this is what it looked like in there. And so when you go into the main doors of the Cottage Grove Hotel, you can see these posts, but there's walls in between. And so at this time, the Spray building is a feed store and a lime cement storage. And this is a parade scene of little girls with their dolly buggies. It's really cute. And you can't read it on the screen, but this is I think there's something more to this title, but all I could read was Oregon Woolen Outfitters Store. And you can see that it's Knowles and Grabber on the side there. This was the Pioneer Hardware, but it's called the Stuart Hines building. And the Thompson Hotel that almost burned, that's those buildings down there. And this is the very first picture I collected of Main Street that started this passion of collecting images of Main Street, Cottage Grove. And this is about 1914, and there's a Porter's Garage, or Porter's Garage, I think, is in there. But I just love these old wagons, and just look at all the people on Main Street, in the shade, on the shady side. And I honestly think the date of this picture is wrong, and more research needs to be done, because the post office wasn't there in 1923, and I'll explain more in a minute. But the post office was there at one time in the Bartell Hotel. This is it gives you, I think this was probably a concept of what it could look like, but this is what the rooms look like. And one can imagine it looked like this when Buster Keaton and his crew was here in 1926. And I took the dates out of this but what I learned is, all right, Corey Bartell, not to be confused with the Bartell Meat Company Bartells, he made a deal with Billy Cooper in 1924 to finish these buildings, the top stories. And the plans included the elevator and $20,000 worth of improvements. And he didn't get started until the first part of 25. And so that's why I think the picture that I was of this parade, I think this might be a 28 instead of a 23, or it should be. But isn't this cool? I just love this. And this little Pacific Northwest thing was in the bottom left of the stationery, but it's got a car and it's got a fisherman and our mountains.
Another mural.
Yes, another mural. And the flood. This was the flood of February 1927, and it actually got higher than this. But look, it's almost like waves coming down Main Street, probably from people, wakes from cars or yeah. But and it says Stage Depot, but the barn's gone. But we've got Fred's Place, which was a restaurant, the Bartell Hotel. You see the Knowles and Grabber on the Stuart Hines building. And this is Billy Cooper. And this is courtesy of Casey Woodard. He acquired this picture on an excursion down to Eagle Point. Yes. And so he had mailed this to somebody. And so I did some research, and he mailed it to his dad named Henry in Iowa. And I did some research on him, and he was born in Iowa in 1881. And unfortunately, he died while visiting Belknap Hot Springs in 1930. He had had a surgery and went to convalesce there. His wife and daughters went to Portland while he convalesced there, and he died of a cerebral hemorrhage. And what's really sad is his wife, Ruth, and their daughters, Dorothy and Charlotte, his holdings were worth $130,000, but sadly he'd mortgaged everything because he was a speculator. He'd build, he'd mortgage, he'd build, he'd mortgage, and all they ended up with was his worldly goods, his personal belongings. And here's Fred's Place now is a brick building, and it was built in 1938 by the Braswell family. And you can see that the sign on the side is gone, and now it just says, I can't even tell you what that says, sorry. I had eye surgery 3 weeks ago and I don't have glasses. I think it says Cottage Grove Hotel now. Yes, it does, because Corey Bartell left before the 40s. And so this is the earliest view I could find of the Woodson Brothers service station. And they also had a presence across the street for a while. And so this one...
Is that a Ford garage now?
Yes. And so now it's the Holloman building downtown, but isn't that gorgeous? I wish they'd take all that slip off of it. And the Cottage Grove transfer had moved into the Spray building. And see, at this time, this is North 9th Street, and you could not go this way. There was a little pathway for just service vehicles, but there was no street. And here's a better picture. And now it's actually called the Ford Garage, because they limited themselves to just sell Fords. But isn't that a great picture down our main street? And here's the Hotspot building where we have the Buster mural. And this shows where the street was opened up, the Spray building is gone, and it happened, they opened the street in October of 1940. And I have a document that says what all had to be moved, and even houses all the way down to where 5th Street comes in, homes had to be moved. And at this time, it's Floyd Githen's Motors, and the rest of these buildings down to the end of the block were called the Githen buildings, and he built those. There's our beloved train station that Susan Hubner-Sanez was on an effort with some others to save that building, and they actually moved it to the North Regional Park, and some kids or vagrants or somebody built a fire in it and burned it down. And so here's Brown Lumber Company that sat where Bohemia Park is. And this is taken probably from around Monroe Avenue looking north. But this is what was out there. There was a mill, different mills out there for a long time. And that same Henry Fisher was the manager of this mill, probably about this time.
What's the building in the background? Is that the hotel?
This is the, it was a flour mill, and then it became the railroad maintenance house. And here we have the Cottage Grove Manufacturing Company, and this is Mill Street, AKA now 10th Street. And here is the water tower that they're hoping to replicate on that corner. And then we have the beautiful Bohemia Park, the splash pad. And on the tables, there's some slips that have 4 QR codes. This is one of them. It goes through the history of how Bohemia Park became. And then there's also the one for the Blue Goose, and I just love how this turned out. And my family sponsored this bench right here, and the plaque has been installed for my dad. He was the narrator, a volunteer for 8 years, 2 times on Saturday, 2 times on Sunday, telling people the history, the jokes, the yarns, going up to Culp Creek and back. Are there any questions?